Hi, welcome back to Raven Views the News. Today is February 24th, 2011, and I am Adam Erickson.
I'm Suzanne Ross.
And we are with the Raven Foundation, and we've been asking ourselves for the last couple of weeks, what is going on in North Africa / Arabia / the Middle East with all of these protests?
And not only that, but what do we have to say about it? I mean, we've been quiet about it with ourselves and with you as we've been watching the events unfold because it was really hard to figure out what was going on and what how we could be helpful in understanding and diagnosing what was happening. But I think that two things. One, it is hard to figure out in the midst of history what's happening.
Yeah, and you have all of these different sources telling you some different things about the dynamics that are going on in these countries at the moment. And who do you trust?
Exactly. And it's just reminding me that history is always written after the trajectory of events unfold, and because you can't tell a narrative about what's happening till you know the end.
Right.
And so the second point is that our silence, in a way, is deliberate, because waiting patiently without judgment is a discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that practicing that discipline, especially in such an uncertain situation like this, is not a bad idea.
Yes. Now, there are some things that I feel comfortable in saying just from an anthropological point of view, how humans tend to work. And what can often happen is that we gain a sense of identity over and against another person or another group. So our identity is formed in kind of an antagonistic way.
Right.
And the danger that happens there is that it's fine to accuse a ruler of being unjust, which when a ruler is unjust, you probably should.
Mm-hmm.
But where do you go from there?
Right.
Where do you go after the protest so that your identity is transformed from being over and against something into being something more positive?
Right. Yes, that anthropological point, I think, is really critical for us as observers and for the people involved, because the relationship of the West to the Arab world and the Muslim world is very complex. The relationship between the people in those countries and their rulers is very complex. And so there's no one plot line, one story, one monolithic identity that exists.
Right, and what I mean by this being an anthropological point is that it's not just us observing them over there who have everything backwards and that's why they can't get their stuff together. It's also us here observing our own selves and our own political dynamic and how often our politics are formed over and against our rival as well. Well, how do we get out of this trap?
Right. Yes. One of the things that we've observed, not just in this situation, but in others, political situations especially, is that this identity formation over and against someone, which we call scapegoating,
Mm-hmm.
can happen with a scapegoat who is actually guilty of some crime or some horrible thing. On a lighter note, we saw it here in Illinois with the Rod Blagojevich governor thing, where we all coalesced around this idea: if we get rid of Rod, everything will be fine. Well, we still have a gazillion billion-dollar deficit. I don't know what it is. Things are not fine in Illinois, but Rod is gone.
Well, Rod's a product of Illinois government.
Yes.
So it's easy to scapegoat him.
It's easy to scapegoat.
We still have issues.
Right. But when we were watching, when I in particular was watching the crowds in Egypt protesting against Mubarak, I was very keenly aware that they were as you say, calling a corrupt leader to account. And yet I was very worried that they were going to get sidetracked by thinking, well, if we can just get rid of Mubarak, things will be fine. And Mubarak was the problem, but as you say, a product, both a product and a driver of a system that has to be transformed from within.
And part of what's exciting about what's happening in these situations is that this critique of unjust rulers comes from within Islam itself.
Yeah.
So it's not that these Muslims who are critiquing unjust rulers are doing so because the West has come in and influenced them, and this is really an anti-Islamic thing that they're doing. They're doing it from within the roots of Islam itself. And you even look back to Muhammad,
Yeah.
who tells his followers that the powerful, the rulers, are to care for the vulnerable, the weak, the poor, the scapegoats of their culture, the minority. In democracy, we always say that the minority has to have a voice. This is what Muhammad is saying too. Muhammad, even when he makes important decisions, goes to his followers and say, hey guys, what do you think about this? And he takes their feedback.
Right.
And so this idea that Muslim rulers are inherently power-hungry rulers who want to dominate is false.
No, it is false. And the history of Islam is a history of rulers being held to account
Right.
for their relationship with the people. They're as you say, they're a just ruler. Tradition in Islam is that they must answer to the needs of the people, modeled on Muhammad.
Right.
And one of the things I find really interesting is that the West and Islam share this idea of a ruler that's accountable to the people. And we tend to want to locate, in the West, we want to locate that idea as a Western idea.
Right.
But I think the truth is much more complex in that Islam and Europe and the West have had a cross-pollination and an interaction with one another where we have grown these ideas up together.
Right.
You can't say Islam exists here and Europe and Christian Western values exist here. There's no such, you can't separate them out.
Right.
And rather than see Islam as a rival or see them as incapable of sharing our ideas or implementing democracy or whatever the knock is against Islam at this point, I think that the events that we've been witnessing can be interpreted by, especially the United States, that carries the banner of freedom and democracy, as the birth of new partners in what does it take to make a democracy work in nations that take their religious values seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Because if ever there were mirrors of one another, it's the United States and the Islamic world.
Yeah.
Because we are both involved in this struggle to understand what is the relationship between our faith, our religious beliefs, and a secular organization, our governments.
And how do we hold the best of our religious traditions to account, and how do we hold the best of our political statements to account to care for the weak and the vulnerable, the outcast, the minority, the scapegoats.
Absolutely.
That's the job of the rulers of a democracy, politicians. That's the job of the rulers of any political system, is to care for the poor,
Yeah.
the vulnerable, the marginalized. So those are our thoughts on an incredibly complicated situation, and we'd love to hear what you think. Thanks.
Thank you.
Whoa.
What did we break?
Break.
Okay.
Boss is going to be angry. Hi, welcome back to Raven Views the News. Today is February the 24th, 2010.
Are you sure? I think it's the 23rd.
Hi, welcome back to Raven Views the News. Today is February 23rd, 2010.
11. Okay.
Bloopers. For fun.